Breaking news here on CNN Philippines. President Rodrigo Duterte calls out the United Nations during his pre-recorded speech that was aired before the UN General Assembly earlier this morning. Now, to tell us more about the president's speech, we have Presidential Assistant on Foreign Affairs Robert Borje. He is also Chief of Presidential Protocol. Good morning, Yusek Borje. Thanks for joining us today. Now, tell us a bit more about the president's speech. We aired a portion of it earlier, and he called out the UN at the end of that speech. What brought this on?
Thank you very much, Ms. Rodriguez, for the invitation again. And I think the president was very clear in his statement to the United Nations earlier today that the United Nations needs to reform. But the progeny of this is, of course, the theme for the UNGA 76 General Assembly, which is building resilience through hope. And that includes to recover from COVID-19, to rebuild sustainably, respond to the needs of the planet, respect the rights of people, and revitalize the United Nations. And when you speak of revitalizing the United Nations, it's important that we refer to ongoing reforms that are actually part of the agenda items of the United Nations. This includes reforms of the processes in the General Assembly, as well as the Security Council. And one of that, of course, of the contentious issues is representation at the UN Security Council. And the president said that while democracy and transparency are tenets that are discussed and resonate, reverberate throughout the UN galleries, unfortunately, these two tenets are not practiced, especially in the Security Council, where we know that there are permanent members and that they exercise veto power over the items.
Mm-hmm. But were you surprised? Of course, the president has belittled and threatened the UN in the past over criticisms for his brutal drug war.
I don't think he has belittled it. The president recognizes the important role that the United Nations plays in our world today. But he said it during his speech during the 75th General Assembly that the UN needs to reform itself. And in that speech, he referred to reforms for the General Assembly. This time around, he is referring to reforms in the Security Council, which is, of course, very important given the fact that our world today faces a crises of existential proportions.
Okay.
And that's why he feels the need to, as you say, call it out, but we would say that it's a introspection and reflection on what makes the United Nations important and relevant to people.
Right. Well, the president also highlighted other global issues like booster shots and access to COVID-19 vaccines, and also climate change, like many of the other leaders who spoke before the UNGA. The president also raised the plight of overseas Filipino workers and the South China Sea. Why these particular topics now?
These topics were specifically chosen because not only of the import for the Philippines. We do have principled positions on certain global issues. But again, this falls very squarely with the theme of the United Nations. If you can recall, if you read the statement of the president against the Secretary General's statement, it all folds in very nicely, and there is a conversation, so to speak, on these key issues. Again, the president has said before that it's important to have universal access to vaccines. Otherwise, we will not be able to solve the problem of the pandemic. And he put it very poignantly when he said that there is, the picture is bleak, that there is a man-made drought of vaccines ravaging poor countries. And he's been very principled on that. And the Philippine government has been very principled in all of the fora, international fora, that we need to have universal access to vaccines. Of course, the Philippines is we have a significant number of our population that work abroad as foreign workers. And the issue of the kafala system remains very close to the heart of the president, because he knows that our migrant workers, not just Filipinos, but migrant workers across the globe, are victims to this system. And
course.
Saying that while reforms have been done, we need to continue working on this movement. But he describes as the global political movement, rights movement so that migrant workers are not going to be subject to abuse.
Yes, and we all know the president's speech comes a week after the International Criminal Court gave the go signal to investigate the killings committed during his administration's war on drugs and the killings in Davao City from 2011 to 2016. How important is his participation in this general debate?
Let me just backtrack a bit too. On the issue of climate change, we
Yes.
just wanted to stress that since day one of the president's office, he's been very clear that the developed world needs to do its part because countries like the Philippines are on the receiving end of climate change, of extreme weather disturbances. And he made that call again today, and it resonated throughout the United Nations. And he called on developed countries who can help tip everything to the favor of humanity so that our programs and commitments are continued. When it comes to the International Criminal Court, I think the statement of the president was also very clear that he has a mandate and responsibility to the Filipino people. And if you recall, he said that there are issues and challenges as a country that we want to build, but he said the law applies to all. And this applies to those, he said, who will be found to have acted in excess or in abuse of power.
All right, thank you so much for your time this morning, USEC Robert Borje. Thank you.